Good morning, respected chairpersons, seniors, teachers, my dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. Just think about the lady at 36 weeks of pregnancy. Everybody is expecting some good news. And at the last visit, you reassure her that yes, everything is okay. But there is a sudden bolt from the blue in the form of acute respiratory distress, that too at 36 weeks. So, as you know, there are various causes of acute respiratory distress, but we must rule out the common and life-threatening causes. But remember, the patient presented in emergency, so you have to act very quickly. First thing is, you categorize the patient, whether the patient had antenatal care under you or not. If not, that means you have to give some more time to find out any risk factors or not. And if the patient is already known to you, find out whether there are any risk factors or not, and if there are risk factors, whether these risk factors can account for patient's symptoms or not. Then look at the patient. Is she in collapse condition? If not, then put her in proper position, give oxygen and measure the oxygen saturation. If the condition improves, then she is relatively stable, go for complete assessment. If not, then see whether there are signs of labor bleeding. If yes, then immediately go for endotracheal intubation and mechanical ventilation, because pregnancy makes endotracheal intubation at least 3 times difficult than non-pregnant individual. And if the patient is in collapse condition, try to stimulate her. If she is responsive, then okay. Otherwise, that means she is in shock. Then you have to go for ABC algorithm for cardiopulmonary resuscitation. And please remember, while giving CPR in a pregnant lady, put her in left lateral position to avoid the vena cava compression. Then go for complete assessment, including auscultation of chest, heart, and assessment of vital signs. There are long list of investigations. What investigation you will choose depends on the clinical scenario and sometimes on the advice from your colleagues. There is a tendency in pregnancy to avoid radiological investigations, particularly for the fear of fetal affection. Please remember, in all common cases of radiological investigations, the chances of fetal radiation exposure is much lower than the fetal radiation exposure that is needed to cause fetal damage, that is much less than 50 milligray. So there is no reason why you should withhold any radiological investigation, because simply that she is pregnant. Of course, it's not a one-man show, so you have to take help from your colleagues. But remember, the colleagues who are taking care of pregnancy must be aware of the physiological changes occurring in pregnancy, because these changes can distort the clinical findings and it can affect the investigations. So please take care while interpreting ECG, particularly the pulmonary function test and arterial blood gas. And please remember, pregnancy is a condition of physiological alkalosis, so acidosis is commonly missed while interpreting ABG. And the same physiological conditions can pose challenges in managing the patients, particularly there are increased CPR demands, there is difficulty in intubation, and there is risk of aspiration, and pregnant women are more quickly to develop hypoxia and acidosis. I am not going into the details of ICU management because we are not intensivists, but remember, it's important to maintain maternal as well as fetal oxygen saturation. And while the patient is very much hypoxic and acidotic, it's worthy to consider the electronic fetal monitoring to monitor the fetal condition. Then go for definitive management according to the cause, and then obstetric management when the patient is stable. Usually the mode and time of delivery is guided by the obstetric factors. Avoid tocolytics, particularly beta-mimetics, as you all know. And if you have put the patient on therapeutic anticoagulation, there should be at least 24 hours gap between the last dose of therapeutic anticoagulation and the regional anesthesia. When the patient is not responding to your cardiopulmonary resuscitation, plan for post-peripartum cesarean section and do it within 5 minutes of starting the CPR. And there is no need to shift the patient to theatre only for performing this type of cesarean section, because only instrument needed to do it is a simple scalpel. Now, some case scenarios. A lady, 25 years old, she is asthmatic. Just remember, she is asthmatic does not necessarily mean that every case of respiratory distress will be caused by asthma. And in fact, the asthma usually improves in 3rd trimester. Now, the lady on examination was found to be in shock. There were ECG changes, EPG was altered, and troponin T test negative. So the diagnosis is pulmonary thromboembolism. As you know, pregnancy itself is thrombogenic. So whenever you are suspecting pulmonary embolism, start anticoagulation first and then go for investigations and continue the anticoagulation unless the investigations have ruled out the pulmonary embolism. The second case, twin pregnancy, anemic. Again, don't be confused by anemia because the respiratory distress may not be explained by simple anemia. And in fact, in this case, there were basal cracks, hypertension and proteinuria. So the diagnosis is easy, pulmonary edema due to severe preeclampsia. So you know the management, and there is no reason to withhold max sulf simply because there was respiratory distress, because max sulfate therapeutic concentration can never lead to pulmonary toxicity. And positive end expiratory pressure can lead to dramatic improvement in syndrome in case of pulmonary edema. Now the third case, 39 years, multipara, obese. Past history nothing suggestive except chronic hypertension which is controlled, complaining of nocturnal dyspnea and orthopnea. On examination, little hypertension, bilateral pores crackles, JPP raised and pedal edema. Echocardiography showed low ejection fraction and all the cardiac chambers were dilated. So the diagnosis is peripartum cardiomyopathy. As you know, it can happen unexpectedly, just like bolt from the blue. There are known risk factors although, and there is high chance of recurrence, and the management is in the same line as with dilated cardiomyopathy in non-pregnant individuals. Fourth case, IVF conception, little elderly, overt diabetic which is controlled, complaining of vomiting, epigastric pain followed by chest pain and acute breathlessness. So you must be thinking about diabetic ketoacidosis, but on examination, blood sugar and the ketones were all normal. She was in shock with cold extremities, ECG showing ST elevation and the troponin T test positive. So it's a case of acute myocardial infarction because this lady has almost all the risk factors for developing AMI. Please remember, pregnancy itself is infarctogenic, that is pregnancy increases the risk of acute myocardial infarction, and there is a peculiar complication that is coronary dissection which occurs almost exclusively in pregnancy. And because she is pregnant does not mean that you cannot hold any investigation or treatment. Even thrombolytics are considered safe in AMI with pregnancy. This case came to you for the first time, so you know nothing about the patient, developed breathlessness, hemoptysis, cough. On examination, tachycardia, irregular pulse beat, soft mid diastolic murmur, and she had irregular ANC and childhood history was suggestive of rheumatic fever. So the diagnosis is mitral stenosis. Please auscultate the heart and chest at least at the first antenatal visit in every pregnant woman because you don't know whether she had any underlying heart disease or chest disease or not. As you know, the pregnancy can exacerbate the stenotic heart lesions. Sixth case, no apparent risk factors, developed malaise, diarrhea, has vague symptoms, running nose, followed by sudden onset dyspnea. On examination, findings are nothing much suggestive. CSF patchy infiltrates and H1N1 serology positive. So the diagnosis is atypical pneumonia, that is influenza. Pregnancy increases the severity of influenza and pregnant women are more susceptible to influenza, and there is no reason to withhold the prophylactic vaccination and prophylactic and therapeutic antivirals in influenza in pregnancy. Case 7, known case of sickle cell disease, develops chest pain and dyspnea. Diagnosis is simple, so you have to rule out the sickle cell complications, that is acute chest syndrome. Here the symptoms, the history is directly related to the symptoms. So pregnancy increases the risk of attacks of acute chest syndrome in sickle cell anemia. While giving analgesic, please do not give petidine because petidine increases the chance of convulsion in sickle cell disease. This is the last case, no apparent risk factors, abdominal pain, was in false labor. So you advise some pain relief medication. Immediately after getting it, she developed acute respiratory acute dyspnea followed by vomiting. And while the sister gave you a call, she gave her ondansetron and oxygen, followed by immediate relief of all the symptoms. So what may be the cause? It's simply tramadol-induced respiratory depression, which is usually completely reversed by ondansetron. So, in a nutshell, while dealing with a lady with acute dyspnea in pregnancy, think about common and life-threatening causes. Diagnosis and management should go on simultaneously, not first diagnosis and then management, because in that case there is chance that you may lose the patient. And of course, involve the multidisciplinary team. Thank you very much for your patient care.
Thank you very much.